In a December meeting, 2020, former prosecutor Jack Smith, in a meeting with EU ambassadors, said that KLA leaders will be sentenced to life in prison before the trial had even begun. What does this reflect? What does this mean?
If this information is a real fact recorded, it shows the characteristics of something that in literature and practice is known as a show trial. So show trials are an interesting form of justice. First of all, because they are not meant to prosecute and punish perpetrators and deliver justice to victims, but they are meant to be performance for outside world, outside the court. They need to send a message. Second characteristic of show trials, that the outcome is determined before the trial even starts. And there is a growing literature on show trials since Stalin times to Saddam Hussein times. And what we who worked actively in international criminal justice from 19s onwards were really trying to achieve is to show that international crimes could be tried in a domestic or international courts with all highest regulations that are important for fair trials. If the outcome of a trial dealing with mass atrocities and political violence has been determined in advance, and if the judgments and convictions eventually show that indeed the KLA wartime leaders will be imprisoned for the rest of their lives, then unfortunately we will need to have a conclusion that these sort of trials are show trials.
In the same meeting, Ekaterina Trandafilova called the Kosovo flag in the courtroom a provocation, threatened that this issue wouldn't be raised again. Yet verdicts are delivered in the name of the people of Kosovo. What is this?
Well, it shows the basic presumption and a principle of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers that it is indeed a court founded by the Republic of Kosovo, i.e. the Kosovo people. In reality, we know that the whole operational part of this is outsourced to the internationals. And this created from day one ambiguity, and in a popular language you can call it schizophrenia. Why? Because even for the president of the court, apparently, it is still not clear whether she is acting on behalf of Kosovo people and Kosovo Republic, or is she just a civil servant appointed by international community that took over the governance of Kosovo state in its current form. And this schizophrenia is not going to be taken away, but it will reflect on the way how the court is perceived by Kosovo people. If Kosovo people say, okay, our parliament voted for amendments to our constitution to make this court possible, then we need to feel that this court really serves our interests of us Kosovo people. And if our flag is banned from the courtroom, then we go back to this basic premise and ambiguity. Whose court is this? And which purpose does it serve? And for Kosovo people, this confusion basically undermines and erodes the legitimacy of the court altogether, because no one is sure anymore what is the formal mandate of the court and what court is actually doing in a real, because, you know, Kosovo people are on the receiving end of this justice. And if they do not feel that this court has legitimacy anymore, then the justice it will deliver will be under a huge question mark. And this is a huge risk by internationals to take.
So, given that the prosecutor and judges have accepted evidences from Serbia, despite well-known reasons for concern, do you think the Hague process is shaping a new historical narrative about Kosovo by accepting evidences from Serbia?
This is the evidentiary basis of every trial, and especially every trials dealing with political crimes, mass atrocity, will depend on this factual evidentiary basis. What happened, how it happened, who did it, how it was done. So can you imagine Kosovo as a war theater with one major perpetrator? It's a Serbian state and its security forces, police, armed forces, and paramilitaries. And in the case at the ICTY, where I worked for, Kosovo war theater was extremely important to prove the accountability and criminal responsibility, say, of Serbian leader at the time, Slobodan Milosevic, at whose trial I worked. So can you imagine this sort of paradox that during Milosevic's time, for the Kosovo crimes, we as a prosecution of Yugoslavia Tribunal, prosecuting Slobodan Milosevic, were doing arm wrestling operation with Belgrade in Serbia to provide all the evidence we needed, inculpatory evidence, to prove Slobodan Milosevic's responsibility for mass atrocities in Kosovo. And you know what? They found all possible ways to avoid this responsibility, not to cooperate. So they were denying what the Joint Command was, for example, because it was an informal body made in a de facto way during the war, where all security forces, including VJ, army, police forces, were actually working together on a side agenda that consisted of violence against civilians, which is a war crime per definition. So we fought so hard to prove the Joint Command was a real thing. They denied, they said, and now, can you imagine me watching what is happening at the Kosovo trial, where Serbia suddenly delivers truckloads with documents, which they claim they didn't have during Milosevic's time, to inculpate Kosovo wartime leaders. And you know what? Prosecution at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers are extremely happy of this one-sided channel of provision of inculpatory documents. This can't be balanced justice, that there is such a skewed way how you use Belgrade archives on one side to prove responsibility of its own wartime leaders when they suddenly don't have these documents, and for the same conflict at a different court where KLA stands accused of grave crimes, Belgrade is overproducing documents. And you know what? Because these documents are originated in Belgrade, we shall never know whether these documents are created post facto with exactly the same stamps that existed during the war. And prosecution should be extremely cautious of Kosovo Specialist Chambers to let Serbia have a free hand to deliver truckloads of documents, because you know, you can maybe get it all in a short period of time in an indictment, in an evidentiary basis. But after the judgment is rendered, the real investigation into this documentation starts outside of the courts by historians and other people. And what will happen if in 10, 20 years' time, we discover that many of these documents were forged, doctored, worked on, then the whole Kosovo Specialist Chamber work will be in jeopardy. But let not worry us with the reputation of Kosovo Specialist Chambers, but let concern us, what would it mean if Kosovo wartime leaders end up locked in a jail, in a prison for the rest of their lives, following this first 2020 sentence from Jack Smith that they are going to end up in a sentence of life imprisonment. And if you would add then these documents produced in Serbia to inculpate them, the tragic situation is that these people might indeed spend the rest of their lives in jails, and this would be tragedy on personal but also societal and state level.
Yeah. In a positive side, in September, key international figures such as General Wesley Clark, Ambassador William Walker, and former UN representative Bernard Kouchner will testify in defense of Hashim Thaçi and others. Could their testimonies help change the narrative?
The war narrative and war narrative of Kosovo recent history cannot be changed by testimony of 10 people at a court. This is much more complex, interactive process than this. What is most important, well, their testimonies will be authoritative enough to challenge all these allegations and evidence that prosecution brought in their part of the case, prosecution part of the case. So first goal of these testimonies would be to challenge this narrative of guilt and proving of guilt of the accused at this point, KLA Kosovo leaders, and that might be very important for the text of the judgment and eventually conviction. So I hope that the primary reason why these high-level people should testify on behalf of defense is basically to contribute to fairness of the trial, evidence, judgment, and eventually acquittal of convention. How does this all going to reflect on historical narrative of liberation war of Kosovo from 98 to 99 is not for the court to decide. And I will tell you why. There has been a misperception cultivated by UN itself when in 1993 they formed Yugoslavia Tribunal. When they said, okay, this court is important, UN said this, it was creation of Security Council of UN, said, this court, as any criminal court, will deal with accountability of perpetrators, so punish them if they are found guilty beyond reasonable doubt as charged in the indictment. Secondly, they need to deliver justice for victims. Victims who suffered should feel that this was done in a proper way and those responsible are locked away and the truth was told. Third goal of criminal justice is obviously deterrence. If you punish this person for unleashing the war and violence and criminality, it should deter, prevent the others to do the same. But they also said that it will contribute to establishing the facts and truth about the conflict. And this is why we need now, 30 years after practice of international criminal justice, put some footnotes and doubts about. You know why? Judgments, trial evidence, judgments, convictions, all other materials that you can find in trial archive have a huge limitation. They are frozen in time. Once the judgment and conviction is rendered and all appeal processes are done, this truth of trial judgment is frozen in time. You cannot change it, especially, for example, if after 20 years, all telling inculpatory document appears, and you could reopen the case, basically, but this indicted person died. So legal process has no place to go. But you know who saves the day? Historians. Because not only that historians cannot act in contemporaneous situation, because for historians, historical distance, removal from the time and space when it happened, actually adds up to objectivity. And historians are not bound by so many limitations, and the courts and legal professions are. So do not even think in Kosovo that the historical, political, and legal narrative of liberation war and post-war situation needs to be outsourced to these tribunals and international community. People of Kosovo, this is your duty now to take responsibility in your hands, and with a distance of 30 years, using all these trial records as a historical source, write the narratives of your war, of your experience, not just from a position of high politics, international Kosovo leadership, but also from a perspective of you, people who suffered. Write your own social history about this. Because if you live a normal life in a peaceful country, you never really realize what history writing is all about. It is never about one complete, boiled, bottled, conserved history narrative forever. No, historical narrative is a process in making. And the more different narrative stories exist, the better and more smoothly this historical narrative process is going on. And do not forget, in historical narrative, one of the most important things next to historical distance is multi-plurality. You need different actors to record their own narratives about certain period in time, and only then you can actually claim control on history writing. But do not leave it, do not outsource it for external institutions, even high-level international courts.
Okay, it's all this the reason. Why are you here today to protest? Why are you here?
I'm here today not to protest. I'm here to empower people of Kosovo to take their own fate, own destiny in their own hands, and to see what they are getting from international intervention and governance in Kosovo for all these years, and to amend this agenda, rewrite this agenda, and if this agenda needs to be rewritten, reinvented by positioning yourself as a Kosovo people towards this court, then you can actually continue writing your agenda and finding your own empowerment within your own institutions to work on your present situation, because present situation is much better than postponing your well-being to some distant, abstract moment in the future. You need to work on your better today. And if I can contribute in this manifestation today to say that, yes, justice is important, but that justice needs to have legitimization, institutional legitimization, and this court owes you, Kosovo people, to show that it is impartial, transparent, and not prejudiced in the way you quoted at the beginning the former prosecutor Jack Smith, who from the before indictments where they knew that these indictees will end up serving life prison sentences, then I think my message and my coming here will be worthwhile.